Good afternoon. Let's do some business. In fact, we're doing it live right here, doing more at 4 weekday afternoons. We get right down to business with the news-driven hour right after Ben Shapiro and just before the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang at 5. Mottek On Money on the air, 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com. And your on-demand Mottek On Money podcast, kbc.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Winning day on Wall Street today. Stocks finishing higher as tech stocks powered up today. Propelling the broader market higher. The Nasdaq had its best day in about 3 weeks. The Dow also gained 126 points, settling at 42,080. The S&P 500 moved up 55, double nickels on the board there, and the Nasdaq surged 259 points, settling at 18,182. Attention focused on Florida as Florida residents stream out of the Tampa Bay area today ahead of what's expected to be a once-in-a-century direct hit from Hurricane Milton. Once again, a Category 5 hurricane. Work crews there are working furiously to prevent all sorts of debris, furniture, appliances, and other wreckage from the last big storm just a couple of weeks ago from becoming deadly projectiles in this upcoming storm, Milton, which is expected to hit tomorrow. Preparations marking the last chance for millions of people in the Tampa area to prepare for this deadly storm surge. It's expected ferocious winds and possible tornadoes in an area that's narrowly avoided a head-on blow from a major storm in about 100 years. One of the strongest hurricanes in recorded history, now taking aim on the west coast of Florida. Of course, the 790 KBC news team on this story will have complete coverage again for you tomorrow as the storm approaches. A rally in oil taking a pause today, sending prices lower by about 4%. This as the Hezbollah terror group reportedly said it supports efforts by Lebanon for a ceasefire now with Israel, helping to ease tensions for the moment in the Middle East. Traders have been waiting to see how Israel might respond to last week's Iran missile attack, also showing disappointment over a lack of new economic stimulus measures from China following China's return to business from a national holiday. Meanwhile, Israeli forces have killed the would-be successors of the late Hezbollah leader. The Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu made the announcement today, all this a day after Israel held somber ceremonies to remember the victims of the mass killings and abductions carried out by Hamas a year ago, October 7th, against the backdrop of continuing fighting in the Gaza Strip and Lebanon. I'll discuss the latest on what's happening with gas and oil prices and production given what's happening in the Gulf of Mexico and Middle East. John Kilduff will be joining me live later this hour, oil analyst at Again Capital and CNBC contributor. The extreme flammability of EV batteries on display once again in Florida. EVs have been flooded in salt water. They can catch fire. Fire authorities in Florida warning people about this, and I'll discuss that and the latest EV and car news with our go-to car expert, Lauren Fix, editor-in-chief of Car Coach and the co-host of the Total Car Score podcast. We heard from a couple of Fed heads today. The Federal Reserve Governor Adriana Kugler said that she supported further interest rate cuts with the speed dependent on the outlook for jobs and inflation. And the Boston Fed President Susan Collins said today there are risks to the U.S. economy not only from sticky inflation but also an economic downturn. Collins said there's still a good chance that the labor market stays solid as inflation comes down, but there are risks on both sides. It looks like inflation pressures are rising given what's happening, especially in the oil patch. Shares of Trump Media and Technology continuing their rally today, gaining about 18%. The stock's been rallying following an appearance by Tesla's CEO Elon Musk alongside former President Trump at a big campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania over the weekend. Now on your money, the markets, the economy, and the whole works. Joining us live now, the one and only Steve Forbes, chairman and editor-in-chief of Forbes Media, which includes Forbes Magazine, and author and co-author of numerous books, including his latest, Inflation, What It Is, Why It Is Bad, and How to Fix It. Steve Forbes, thank you very much for coming to the line this afternoon.
Good to be with you, Frank. Thank you.
Wonderful to have you with us. Of course, everyone's watching what's going to happen in Florida with this enormous storm approaching the West Coast there, the Tampa Bay area. This is going to be a big one here.
It is indeed. And it's amazing that this is going to be hitting tragically right after Helene. And the area hasn't had a direct hit like this since the early 1920s. I think they're doing all they can. The governor, DeSantis, has done a good job in preparing as much as you can on that, including, as you reported earlier, hastening the pickup of debris and the furniture and the like, so you don't have those deadly missiles from the winds that are coming. But it also underscores that this is going to disrupt supply chains for a while, but we can recover from those. And I think that the disaster relief certainly on the non-government level, is going to do as much as they can to mitigate the losses and the damage.
And certainly a lot of attention focused on how FEMA money is being spent these days. The reports and looks like a lot of money's been spent on immigrants here in the U.S., especially in New York and other places, and indeed around the country, and taking money away from disaster relief. What's your reaction to these reports that keep rolling in on that?
Well, it's quite something that a government that is spending record levels of trillions of dollars can't come up with the dollars for FEMA to do the job that it was created to do, and that is deal with natural disasters, not border crises. And so I think the focus should be, the answer often when a government agency fails is to throw more money at it. I think what we have here is a management problem, and I think the contrast you see between what the private sector is doing, people like Elon Musk and others are doing, versus what FEMA's relatively slow approach has been, is quite a contrast. So the key is not to focus on how much money FEMA gets, but what is wrong with the management of it, the structure of it, and that's got to be examined in a cool, bipartisan way after the storm season is over.
Of course, you're based in New York, and a lot of people moved from New York to Florida, and it looks like almost the entire state of Florida is under an evacuation order at this point, given this monster storm about to hit Florida. From the conversations you're having with movers and shakers there in Florida, are they rethinking their decision to be based there at this point?
The answer is not yet. If these monster storms become the norm, which they won't be, there's a cyclicality of sorts with these disasters. I think the economic climate is still far better than what we have in the New York metropolitan region, Illinois, your state of California. And I've heard no reports of people deciding they're going to move back to the certainly in business side, inhospitable environment of states like Illinois or California or New York or New Jersey. So the key is that the effective response, I think, the way the government is working there, far better than what we've seen in some other states with disasters. I think people speak well. There's certain things that are beyond human control, but in terms of Florida itself, each area of the country can have disasters. I have a kid's family living in Texas, where you get tornadoes. So California, earthquakes. There's always something there that can lead to tragic events, but that shouldn't prevent you from making a decision to move to what you think is overall going to be a better climate. And by the way, Texas summers are not nice. But air conditioning makes it tolerable, and that's why people are moving there by the millions.
Well, here in California, especially Southern California, the real estate people will tell you really all real estate here in Southern California is free, actually. What you pay for is the weather. And we are enjoying a beautiful day here, mercifully, and certainly our hearts go out to the victims of Hurricane Helene and now bracing for Milton there in Florida. So we wish everyone all the very best. Now, we're speaking a day after October 7th, the one-year anniversary of the terror attack on Israel, and word today that Israeli forces have killed the would-be successors of the Hezbollah leadership. Give us your view of what's playing out there.
Well, what we see, reflect on the first year after this horror attack on October 7th, 2023, is that you have to have peace comes through strength and the willingness to use that strength to thwart adversary forces. And unfortunately, this administration, the Biden-Harris administration, loves diplomacy, but hasn't recognized that diplomacy not backed up by a credible power is fruitless. They've been appeasing Iran for years now. They still are allowing Iran to sell billions of dollars of oil illegally to China, hoping that would make the mullahs more amenable. We've seen how well that works. And we've seen, unfortunately, with Hamas and Hezbollah, they are determined to destroy the Jewish state, period. And when you deal with revolutionary forces, you have to be very, very forceful in response. And so instead of hampering the Israelis, as we've been doing for a year, we should say, what do you need? We can give advice. They're doing very well to do, although you never know it from the regular media. They've been doing as well as possible in terms of minimizing civilian casualties and let them get the job done. And that's not what we're doing. And unfortunately, as we've chatted on, discussed before, touched on before, Israel at some point is going to have to make a decision whether to allow Iran to become a nuclear power. They're on the verge of it. And so I think a decision is going to be made sooner rather than later. And I hope we don't try to thwart that if the decision is made, because the last thing we need is a revolutionary terror regime in possession of nuclear weapons, and they're developing the missiles to deliver them, not only in the Middle East, but also ultimately in the not too far distant future to the United States of America. And that is intolerable. We should never let that happen.
Israel preparing to possibly strike Iran in retaliation for that recent missile attack by Iran on Israel. What's the latest you're getting there as to how this might play out? And do you think Israel will go after the nuclear program in Iran?
I think ultimately, Frank, Israel will go after the nuclear program. The question is the timing of it. And one of the things that stands out like a bloody sore thumb is that the Houthis are still able to hit commercial ships, still attacking, sending drones and missiles in the air, which the U.S. Navy is trying to shoot down. And we still haven't gotten true freedom of navigation in the Red Sea, freedom of the seas in that area. And that's something that should have been done months ago. And so the inability of the United States to guarantee something that has been a core principle of U.S. foreign policy for over 200 years, freedom of navigation, freedom of the seas, is again showing that unfortunately the U.S. is perceived rightly as weak, unwilling to take sometimes the hard steps to make sure we have a relatively peaceful order in the world, and that our adversaries don't feel they're going to be able to commit aggression and go unpunished.
On there live with Steve Forbes, the latest book by Steve Forbes and a co-author. He's written numerous books, of course. Is Inflation Why It Is, Why It Is Bad, and How to Fix It. We're getting a new reading on inflation tomorrow. The Fed will be watching that one. And then, of course, that after the stronger-than-expected jobs report we got recently. What's going to happen tomorrow, you think, on inflation, and what do you think the Fed's next move will be?
Well, the inflation report should continue to be mild as how they measure it. You know, one of the things they leave out of the inflation report is interest that you pay on car loans, credit cards, mortgages. They used to be counted as a cost of living, but they took it out in the early 1980s, so the official inflation rate wouldn't go up so much, so they wouldn't have to make adjustments to Social Security payments as much to make up for inflation. So the pressures are easing, but what I think, unfortunately, the Federal Reserve has this peculiar notion that the way you fight inflation is to depress the economy. And already you're starting to see flickers of inflationary worries in the future, which the Fed are absolutely ignoring. Commodity prices have been moving up, and the gold price has been moving up. That's a signal that the dollar is not as strong as it should be, stable, I should say, as strong as it should be. And if that continues, then we're going to have an inflationary problem in the future. And I think whoever is the next president has got to examine the Federal Reserve and get them away from this deadly notion that the way you cure inflation is by depressing the economy. Prosperity does not cause inflation. A weak dollar causes inflation.
And as we've seen the presidential election season play out, big differences in tax policy between former President Trump and Vice President Harris. What strikes you as to the differences here and the important choice people will be making here coming up in about a month or so?
The differences are profound. Vice President Harris is proposing, among other, raising our business tax to what will be the second highest in the world, higher than that of Russia, higher than that of China. The personal income tax rate will be one of the highest in the world. Capital gains tax levy that she's proposing is going to be one of the worst in the world. And this so-called tax on unrealized capital gains, they say would only be paid by the rich. Not true, because to pay that tax, you have to raise cash, which means they're going to have literally hundreds of billions of dollars of cash sales each year to pay this tax each and every year. And that's going to damage the stock market because you have to have a buyer. And if you're taxing the so-called rich, what you're going to see is a depression in stock prices, which hurt not only the so-called rich, but also anyone who has a retirement plan, a pension plan, an IRA, a 401k, or whatever. Those values are going to be damaged. So that's a disaster. And those tax increases would throw the economy into a severe recession, which means you're going to get higher prices ultimately because they're going to have to float more bonds, where the Fed's going to print more money, and we're going to have a weaker economy. And that's not only bad for us, it's bad for the world. When the U.S. gets in serious trouble, the rest of the world gets in serious trouble. So I just think this contrast between Trump and Harris on taxes couldn't be more stark.
Steve Forbes, wish we had more time. As always, thank you very much for taking the call today. Steve Forbes, Chairman, Editor-in-Chief of Forbes Media, which, of course, includes Forbes Magazine, author and co-author of numerous books, including his latest, Inflation, What It Is, Why It Is Bad, and How to Fix It. Steve Forbes, thank you very much for joining us live this afternoon.
Thank you, Frank. It's always a pleasure. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you very, very much. And right after the freeways, we go now on 790 KABC. Hi, friends. Did you know that for more than 10,000 years, gold has been the greatest store of value and considered a safe haven asset to preserve your wealth? Well, now with the U.S. debt at over $35 trillion and climbing, not to mention the Biden administration getting us involved in costly wars, developing the digital dollar central bank digital currency, and inflation spiraling, it's more critical now than ever before to safeguard your assets like your cash savings and retirement accounts with physical gold. Opening a gold IRA is one of the best ways to secure your wealth and create a stable financial future for you and your family. Stop worrying about your retirement and the market and cash savings in the bank. Feel confident, prepared, and in control with real physical gold and silver. Give Joe Morgan a call at 1-800-753-8534 today, and he'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. Again, that number is 1-800-753-8534. or visit UnitedGoldGroup.com. 10 news here in 790 KABC. Good afternoon. A winning day for the stock market with the Dow popping 126 points higher at 42,080. The S&P 500 of 55 at 5,751. And the NASDAQ up nearly 260 points at 18,183. The yield in the 10-year note is back up there at 4.02%. That's the one that impacts the fixed-rate mortgage rates, and they've been moving higher again. Taking a look at the magnificent one, NVIDIA, near an all-time high, popping more than $5 today, back to $132.89. NVIDIA on a roll here all of a sudden. Apple, which is also at or near a record high recently. Let's bring up the latest here. Apple shares today at $2.25, $225.77, up more than $4 on the day. Checking the cryptos now, Bitcoin slipping slightly, about $20 lower at $62,194. Ethereum up 8 at $2,448, and Doge at 11 cents. Turning to analog gold from digital gold here, gold up nearly $5 now at $2,640.30 an ounce, and silver up 31 cents at $30.91 an ounce. Oil slipping today, right now at $73.94 a barrel. We'll be talking oil in the next half hour shortly with the oil industry analyst John Kilduff. Shares of DJT, that's the Trump media and technology company stock, DJT, up more than $3 today at $21.80 a share. And now the latest news here in 790 KABC. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KABC. The extreme flammability of EV batteries on display once again in Florida after a Tesla caught fire. EVs have been flooded, and salt water can catch fire. In fact, the folks there in Florida say that if you have an EV that was impacted by storm surge and the recent Hurricane Helene, and now getting ready for Hurricane Milton, if you have an EV that's impacted by storm surge, salt water, you need to get it towed away. The salt water can compromise lithium-ion batteries, leading to thermal runaway, as they call it, that can burn down your home if you've parked your EV in your garage, for example. Let's discuss this and all the car news now with our go-to car expert, Lauren Fix, editor-in-chief of Car Coach and the co-host of the Total Car Score podcast. Lauren, thanks very much for taking the call. And give us your reaction to these latest incidents of EVs catching fire after being inundated in salt water back east.
Well, I was actually in the Hurricane Ian the first time 2 years ago. I have a home in Southwest Florida, and we lived through it, and we saw cars literally catch fire. So as salt water had gotten to these vehicles above the door sill, like where you step into the vehicle, that's enough for that whole panel of batteries that's underneath your vehicle to catch fire, because salt water and electricity don't like each other. We've seen a lot of them. I actually saw quite a few in a salvage yard afterwards. And the water, because it is salt water, does damage to all vehicles, whether it's gasoline powered or electric. But the electric ones can catch fire. We have seen a few thermal runaways, and they take about 50,000 gallons of water to put them out, which is about 10 times more than what it would take for any other type of vehicle. But now I was actually down in Florida again during the last hurricane. I'm not down there for Milton. I happen to be lucky enough to get out. But what we're seeing again is they're telling everyone to park their cars outside. I have a neighbor who has a Taycan, which is the Porsche EV, and he was going to leave it in his house. I said, you're in a low area. If you get water in that thing, your brand new home could go up. It was amazing how fast he had decided to park his car outside and leave it out there. And I have friends in Tampa that had some serious damage. I have quite a few photos I posted on my Instagram account of cars that caught fire and unfortunately took the whole house down. So if you are going to have heavy flooding, find a high spot to put your vehicle outside. One other thing to note, if you purchase an electric car, and I know we've discussed this before, and you decide I want to charge at home because I have a garage or a place I can charge, and you decide to put a charger in, that's great. Make sure you have a certified electrician install it for you. But the most important second part is what people forget, and this is what happened a lot in Florida, and it's happening all around the country. And I'm in Buffalo now, and we've had 3 homes that are in this exact position. The house caught fire. They went to the insurance company and said, hey, I've got a total loss here, and they only paid out about 80%. And the reason that is when you install a charger in your home, you must call your insurance company to let them know. It may increase your insurance, as the car insurance is also more expensive, but if you don't, you won't get the full payout on your house. To the insurance company, it appears to them as if you put an addition on your home that's like a bedroom and a bathroom. You don't tell them, something goes wrong, you don't get coverage. So it's really important that if you do purchase an electric car, and there's some great deals out there, that you absolutely follow this step, because if you miss that one step, it could be expensive.
Wow, that is really something, Lauren. Well, thanks for laying it out that way. I hope your place in Florida is going to be okay in the face of Milton, 100-year storm hitting the West Coast in the next day or so. We'll certainly want to be in touch with you on that. And but this is certainly a big flaw in electric vehicles, not being able to tolerate saltwater intrusion and to have these intense fires break out all over the place. That's very concerning. Are they going to make any changes to address this?
Well, they claim that there is a solid-state battery that has been – everything's great when it's in a lab, but to get it to actual production, that's what we haven't seen. We've seen some technology that has made it so you don't have this thermal runaway. So, in other words, where one cell heats up and heats up the next one and the next one and the next one, because remember, there's a whole bunch of little cells in each pack. So if you thought of it like a six-pack, like if you're thinking in your head, what does it look like? Think of a six-pack of soda. With one can next to the next one triggers it until all 6, but then it triggers into the next 6-pack. And since underneath the car is full of a bunch of batteries, one can trigger the next. And they're flammable because they're lithium. And we're also going to see a lot of other things. I have 2 stories coming out that I'm just finishing up now, and they'll go out next week. One is on a shortage of battery materials and microchips. That's going to impact literally everyone in the car industry again. And also, I've got a story coming on batteries that is another angle that no one's talked about. I think that the key thing is, and that's why I try to, keep you posted on what's going on. I think it's important to note that as of today, what's available is what's available. If you want an electric car, there's tons of 0% finance deals. There's a lot of really great product out there. Just make sure that if you are going to be in a flood situation, a hurricane or tornado, fill in the blank, that you find a safe place to put your vehicle. Whether it be gas or electric. And if it's electric and you did have water damage, you must leave it outside, away from your home, because if it does catch fire, that's not a good thing. You can replace a car. I can't replace you or your home or your family so easily.
That is really something. On the air live with Lauren Fix, our go-to car expert, editor-in-chief of Car Coach, and the co-host of the Total Car Score podcast. And regarding EVs overall, we've seen the reports that the major car manufacturers are once again being forced to confront some hard truths over the EV transition, especially as it relates to consumer taste and other considerations. What's the latest here? Are manufacturers starting to throttle back on EVs, and what's the latest intelligence you're picking up on all that?
Well, it's interesting. This week is I believe it's the Paris Auto Show, and there's an auto show.
And Orange County Auto Show, too.
Oh, that's the Orange County Auto Show. It's worth going to, especially if you're looking to buy a car. Sit in all the vehicles, take your family. Really great for consumers. We're seeing even the Chinese manufacturers starting to bring out hybrid cars because they realize that electric doesn't work for everyone. Not everyone has access to charging stations. It may not work for you in your home or where you work. So what they're doing is they're bringing out hybrids. And so we're starting to see that here in the U.S. as well. Not every manufacturer's on board. General Motors says they're going to stick with either gas or electric, but pretty much every other brand, Volvo, Nissan, Ford, everyone is going to bring back electric and gas combined, which is a hybrid. I highly suggest that you look at leasing those cars because if you own them for a long period of time and one of the two propulsions, either the electric motor or the engine has issues, it gets expensive. So because they're tied together as a pair. So if you're going to do that, leasing is always a great option. There are some great lease deals going on right now, especially because sales were soft for August and September. You might be able to find a really good deal because 2025s are already coming into the dealerships. We're already looking at 2026 cars. So there's some great deals out there if you're in need of a vehicle.
All right. And, of course, some of these inundated cars might end up flooding the used car market soon, too. What's your guidance here to what are some giveaways that a car's been inundated and has been flooded and might be prone to corrosion and saltwater damage and so forth?
Well, that's a really important factor. If you are considering a car, it's a used car lot, it's not at a dealer of the same brand. In other words, a Honda at a Honda dealership or a Toyota at a Toyota dealership, when you're buying a vehicle of another brand, that dealership doesn't know that vehicle. They'll know if it's damaged, but typically the brands are not where the problem is. It's the individual sellers, whether it's Facebook Market, eBay, Cars and Bids, any of those. If you're looking at any of those sites and you find a car and, wow, so this is exactly what I want, price seems right, always take it to an independent mechanic. Have them put it up on the lift. It's probably going to cost you between $150 and $200, worth every penny. If they find that the vehicle has had flood damage, much like collision damage, there is no warranty on flood damage, none. Not for the emission system, not for rust through corrosion, not for anything. Even if the car is low mileage and it's still under 3 years, you have no coverage at all. In addition, a lot of times when cars have been flood damaged, they don't have the safety features that work. In other words, an airbag may not deploy, or it could deploy with no notice. You might not have all those safety features that work. And you may say, so what? The problem is if they don't work and you're in an accident, you become liable for driving an unsafe vehicle, especially in the state of California.
Isn't that something? Of course, we follow you on social media, and I see you've recently posted something about counterfeit car parts, too. What do we need to know about that?
If you have an older vehicle and you think, you know what, I'm trying to get a part for this and I can't find it, and so maybe you go online and you find it on eBay or one of those other kind of places, it's important, first off, to see that this person has at least 100% or close to it as far as ratings or consumer feedback on that, because what's happening is there's a lot of, we'll say, fake parts, Chinese parts that are coming in and they're putting them in boxes that look like the original part. So how do you know? There's 3 quick tips, although I have more on my website. One of them, if the box does not have the hologram on it or QR code, the barcodes, you don't see that, or maybe the word is wrong or it looks funny, don't run away from that part, especially if you're finding it at a swap meet or online. A second thing, if it's way too cheap, there's usually a reason why. Maybe it doesn't work, or maybe it's a knockoff part. And those parts typically don't work or last as long, so you might find yourself back to where you started from. And thirdly, sometimes you get the part and it has no logo on it. Like if it's a Ford part and they're saying came off a Ford car and you don't see the Ford logo embossed on the part, then it's not a Ford part. And same thing is true with any brand. So it's really important that if you're getting aftermarket parts, which is great, I love the aftermarket, they have great options, you may not be able to find what you need, and you may have to find yourself at a salvage yard, which may not be a bad idea. And you can also get rebuilt components from reliable auto parts places that are bigger chains. So just buyer beware. There's a lot of tips on my website if you're doing maintenance on a car, but fake parts have been coming across for decades, and now they're getting worse and worse, and they're dangerous to you as the consumer.
Lauren, thanks very much for that comprehensive update on all things cars. We wish you and all of your friends in Florida all the best there as well. And we'll be in touch, of course.
Thank
Lauren
you.
Fix, editor-in-chief of Car Coach and the co-host of the Total Car Score podcast. Live with us here this afternoon on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC. Mottek On Money continues here on 790 KBC. One of the strongest hurricanes in recorded history taking aim at west coast of Florida. We're tracking Hurricane Milton in the Gulf of Mexico. Oil prices have spiked recently as that storm disrupts oil operations in the Gulf of Mexico. Also, of course, tensions high in the Middle East. We did see a rally in oil taking a pause today, sending prices down by about 4%. As the Hezbollah terror group reportedly said it supports efforts by Lebanon now for a ceasefire with Israel. Of course, we've been waiting to see how Israel might respond to last week's Iran missile attack. Tensions continue to run high. Israeli forces have also killed the would-be successors of the late Hezbollah leaders, according to the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today. Following all these developments very closely, joining us live now is oil industry analyst John Kilduff at Again Capital, also CNBC contributor and longtime contributor to this program. John, thank you very much for taking the call. First of all, what is the situation there in the Gulf of Mexico, one of the strongest hurricanes in recorded history, tearing up the whole oil business there in the Gulf of Mexico?
Yeah, this thing's a monster, Frank. I will say from an oil-producing, natural gas-producing perspective in the Gulf, so far so good, and the path of the storm is going to be sufficiently south and obviously east of the producing platforms that it's not going to be an issue in terms of actual production. However, it's raking. It's been tremendously problematic for the Florida distribution system of gasoline right now. We are seeing about 20% of stations without gas, given this demand spike as so many families and individuals flee in advance of the storm. It's something the system just can't handle. So there are outages at many stations, but I would argue that it's not widespread either. There's enough gasoline being resupplied here pretty consistently that folks should be all right, and most folks who want to get out are going to be able to get out. But it's a horrendous situation. And we've gone through this now so many times, particularly in Florida. Your heart just has to go out to everyone and just pray that they heed the warnings to get out of the way of this storm.
Absolutely. On there live with oil industry analyst John Kilduff, and some of the biggest traffic jams certainly in Florida history underway right now. People running out of gas, adding to this nightmare there. People trying to get away from this terrible storm, and many gas stations without fuel now. I think we've seen this in the past where the military's had to bring in gasoline supplies, certainly in the aftermath of this, whether they'll be able to supply fuel to people that are stuck or looking to evacuate at this point remains to be seen, right?
No doubt, Frank. And the problem then becomes electricity to the stations, because those stations run on electricity to pump the gas out of those big tanks that are underground. Also, too, depending on how ferocious this storm surge is, you'll have potential contamination of supplies. There's a lot of sea-borne importation of fuel into Florida, a lot of pipeline that's exposed to the elements. So, this could really be a terrible situation that'll take some time to get back. Now, I will point out, obviously, that the dislocation of this massive population will then have demand for gasoline and other fuels crater for a time. So, the things can balance out and get resupplied. But there's just a host of logistical problems. I can tell you, when we went through it here in the Northeast with Superstorm Sandy, one of the things that came out of it was that the gas stations ended up being mandated to have backup generators. Again, because of the electricity being the problem, not necessarily the supply of fuel. So again, fingers crossed for these folks. But the important thing is just to get out. You can be inconvenienced for a few days, even a week, but you certainly can't get your life back if you get inundated with the rain, the wind, damage, the storm, and this surge.
On there live with John Kilduff, oil industry analyst. And, of course, then there's the Middle East. Also, you're watching what's happening unfold there. We did see that recent spike in oil prices above $80 a barrel for a time. It looks like it's pulled back a bit here now. John, what's the latest on the intelligence you're getting out of the Middle East and a possible Israeli attack on Iranian infrastructure? Where do things stand at this point?
Man, Frank, this is just high-level, first-order headline trading in the market right now. You saw a tremendous rally over the past couple of days previous to today on the fears in the market about what Israel was going to do to Iran. The speculation has run rampant about everything, as you and I talked about the other day, to a potential strike on Karg Island, which is where the Iranians export the bulk of their crude oil to the world, or to China anyway, and other sites and other infrastructure. Then we saw, obviously, today that you just reported on this signaling from Hezbollah, funny enough, that they might welcome a ceasefire. When you're flat on the mat and you want to, get a break, that's, I guess, what you do. Because right now, what they are all staring down, Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, the Houthis, it's reminiscent of the Godfather movie, not to make light of any of this, but when Michael Corleone settled all the family business, that's what Benjamin Netanyahu is in the process of doing after so many years of Israel being terrorized by all these groups. We're seeing that. What's happening now, Frank, what we're waiting to hear, you saw oil was down about 5%. You just referenced it closed down around 3%, which is accurate. But that came, the renewed rally came on the late news that the plans are still being formulated, that Benjamin Netanyahu forbade his Secretary of Defense equivalent to come to the United States to brief Biden officials and also to get final approval for his plans from his cabinet and Knesset leaders. So this is still very much in play. This oil market will go through the roof if Iranian oil infrastructure gets hit.
We'll give an open line to you, John. Thank you very much for that comprehensive and important update this afternoon. John Kilduff, oil industry analyst at Again Capital, CNBC contributor and longtime contributor here to Mottek On Money on 790 KABC.
Named one of the best personal finance podcasts, The Stacking Benjamin Show with Joe and his friends makes financial literacy fun.
I thought I can just keep spending money, however, do this back of the envelope math if I just cover it by making more money. The three words that make me groan the loudest that broke people say is, I deserve it. I was saying it all the time. Well, I deserve a night out. I don't have any money, but I'll take my last dollars and do a night at a restaurant.
Find out more by searching The Stacking Benjamins podcast, wherever you listen.